What if the universe isn't just an empty void, but a living thing? Worse, what if it's a predator? Some ancient philosophers believed the cosmos isn't just a collection of stars and planets, but a massive, intelligent being that feeds on life. Every civilization that rises, every creature that evolves, is just part of its endless cycle of consumption. Think about it. Why does everything die? Why is suffering a built-in part of existence? Maybe the universe needs it. Maybe our pain, our energy, our very existence is a kind of fuel. Some theories suggest that black holes might be the stomach of this cosmic being, devouring everything in sight. Others say time itself is part of the trap, pulling us forward, making us live, making us experience, just to squeeze every drop of energy from us before we die. This idea is terrifying because it means there's no escape. Religion, science, philosophy, none of them change the fact that we are trapped inside something that needs us, but not in the way we want. If the universe is alive, then everything we do is meaningless, except for the role we play in feeding it. And the scariest part, if it's feeding, that means it's aware of us. The silent gods. What if the gods are real, but they abandoned us? Ancient myths tell stories of gods walking the earth, shaping reality, punishing and rewarding humanity. But at some point they stopped. Some say they died, others say they left, and some believe they're still watching, but refuse to help. Why? One possibility is that we disappointed them. Maybe they created us as an experiment, expecting greatness, only to see endless wars, greed, and destruction. So they turn their backs. Or maybe they can't help us. What if there's something bigger than them, something even gods fear? Then there's the most disturbing possibility. Maybe they were never gods in the first place. Maybe what ancient people saw were advanced beings, not divine ones, and once they got what they wanted from us, they moved on. This idea is terrifying because it flips everything upside down. If gods exist but ignore us, what does that mean for faith, morality, and the purpose of life? And worse, if they're silent because they're afraid, what are they afraid of? The false awakening. What if waking up doesn't mean what we think it does? Ancient thinkers questioned reality long before modern philosophers did. Some believed that every time we wake up, we're not actually waking up. We're just moving to another layer of the dream. Life itself might be nothing more than an infinite series of false awakenings, where we never truly reach reality. This idea is terrifying because it means we might never escape. Every time you feel déjà vu, every time something feels off, but you can't explain why, what if that's the real you, trying to wake up? Maybe death itself is just another layer, and when we think we die, we just wake up somewhere else, never knowing we were trapped in the first place. And here's the scariest part. What if something is keeping us in this loop? Something that needs us to stay dreaming? Eternal hunger. What if hunger isn't just a physical need, but a universal law? In ancient times, hunger was seen as more than just a biological process. It was something deeper, more fundamental, a force that controlled everything. Animals eat each other, civilizations consume resources, stars burn until they collapse. The universe itself seems to exist in a constant state of devouring. Some believed this hunger wasn't just a metaphor, it was a real unseen force that drives everything. It's why people can never be satisfied. It's why the rich always want more. It's why no matter how much we take, we still feel like we're missing something. We are vessels for this hunger, carrying it forward, spreading it, feeding it. And if hunger is the real master of existence, then we are all just fuel. The rotting world. What if the world isn't alive, but decaying? Ancient people saw time differently. They didn't always believe in progress. Some believed the world started in a golden age, perfect and untouched, and ever since it's been falling apart. Every generation is worse than the last, not because of people, but because the world itself is rotting. If that's true, then everything we do is just stalling the inevitable. The mountains crumble, the forests shrink, the oceans rise. Even ideas rot. What we think is advancement might just be rearranging the pieces of something already doomed. And if the world is truly dying, then the real question isn't why, it's what happens when it's finally gone. The oracle's curse. She saw the future, but it never changed. In ancient times, oracles were feared as much as they were worshipped. Kings and warriors sought their guidance, but those who listened too closely often met ruin. The curse wasn't just seeing the future, it was knowing that fate is a trap. A prophecy doesn't offer freedom, it chains you to a path. If you try to avoid it, you end up fulfilling it. If you embrace it, you become its prisoner. This is why oracles often spoke in riddles, because clarity is a curse. What's worse, maybe the future isn't set, but the act of seeing it solidifies it. Maybe destiny only exists because someone peeked ahead. And if that's true, every prediction, every warning, every desperate attempt to escape was never really a choice. The oracle isn't a guide, she's a reminder that we were never in control. The decaying soul. What if the soul doesn't stay pure? What if it rots like everything else? Religions promise salvation, enlightenment, or rebirth, but what if they're wrong? What if the soul isn't an eternal, untouchable thing? What if it wears down piece by piece every time we make a choice, tell a lie, or feel regret? Ancient thinkers feared this. They believed sin wasn't just a moral failure, but a disease, one that slowly erased you, not just in life, but in death. Some souls dissolve over time, fading into nothing, forgotten even by the universe. And then there's the truly terrifying idea. If a soul can decay, what happens when it reaches the point of no return? What if one day there's nothing left of you at all? The parasitic afterlife. You don't own your afterlife, something else does. Many ancient beliefs promised an afterlife, but not all of them were comforting. Some suggested that death wasn't an end or even a new beginning. It was just another form of servitude. The soul, instead of finding peace, is harvested. By what? Some believed in gods who fed on souls, needing them for their own survival. Others thought the dead were forced into endless labour, building something incomprehensible. Some even feared that ghosts weren't wandering. They were trapped, drained slowly until they were nothing but echoes. Maybe this is why some spirits seem to linger. Not because they want to, because they can't leave, because something won't let them go. The endless reincarnation trap. Reincarnation sounds nice, until you realise you can never leave. Ancient cultures often embraced the cycle of rebirth, believing it offered second chances, a way to evolve, but some feared the opposite, that reincarnation wasn't a gift, but a prison. What if there's no enlightenment? What if no matter how much you suffer, how much you grow, how much you beg, there's no exit? You just return over and over, endlessly repeating the same mistakes, forgetting each past life, trapped in a system that was never designed to be escaped. Maybe that's why we have déjà vu. Maybe that's why some people have irrational fears, unexplained pains, memories that don't belong to them. Maybe we've done all this before and we'll do it all again. What if there is no finish line? What if the only truth is that we were never meant to be free? The forgotten names. A person doesn't truly die when their body stops, they die when their name is erased. In some ancient cultures, being forgotten was the worst possible fate. It wasn't just about legacy, it was about existence itself. If no one remembers you, if no record of you remains, then did you ever really live? Some philosophers took this further. Maybe memories are what hold a person together. Maybe the dead don't just fade from history, they fade from reality. Every time a name is erased from a monument, every time a gravestone crumbles, every time a bloodline ends, another soul disappears. And the most disturbing part? What if some things out there want us to forget? What if something is actively erasing people from existence, removing all trace of them, making sure their names are lost forever? How many have already been erased? And how close are we to becoming one of them? The hungry tombs. A grave is supposed to be a final resting place, but what if some graves don't let their occupants rest at all? Ancient cultures often feared the dead, not because they were gone, but because they might come back. Stories of restless spirits, reanimated corpses, and cursed burial sites appear in every civilization. But what if the truth is worse? What if some graves don't just hold the dead, they consume them? Some believed that certain tombs acted as prisons, keeping something trapped inside rather than simply housing a body. These places weren't built to honour the dead, they were designed to keep something buried, not just physically but spiritually. The soul, the essence, the being, all swallowed by the tomb, never to escape. But here's the terrifying part. If some graves take the dead, what happens when they're full? What happens when the hunger isn't satisfied anymore? Do they start taking the living? Do they start pulling at the souls of those who come too close? And worse, what if some of those who are buried weren't dead yet? The Dark Watchers. You are never truly alone. For centuries, people have reported seeing shadowy figures at the edges of mountains, deserts, and forests. They don't move. They don't speak. They only watch. The ancient ones knew them well. They called them guardians, spirits, or even gods. But no one ever claimed they were friendly. What makes the Dark Watchers so terrifying is their inaction. If they wanted to harm us, they would have. If they were protecting something, we would know. But they do nothing. They simply stand there, observing, waiting, for what no one knows. Some believe they are beings outside of time, watching the rise and fall of civilizations. Others think they are projections of something that exists beyond human perception, only partially bleeding into our reality. And then there's the possibility that they aren't supposed to be seen at all, that when we notice them, when we become aware of them, we disrupt something ancient, something unspoken. Maybe they don't want to be acknowledged. Maybe they only appear to those who are already doomed. And if that's the case, how many have already seen you? The reverse mirror. A mirror shows you what's in front of it, but what if it shows something else? Ancient cultures held strange beliefs about reflections. Some thought they captured a piece of the soul. Others believed they were portals, thin, fragile barriers between our world and another one. But the most disturbing idea is the one that never faded, the possibility that the reflection is not really you. What if the version of yourself inside the mirror is aware? What if every time you look away, it keeps watching? And what if one day it decides it no longer wants to stay on the other side? There are stories of mirrors shifting when no one is looking, of reflections moving slightly slower than they should. Some claim that if you stare long enough, longer than is comfortable, you'll start to see something off, a difference in the eyes, a slight distortion in the smile, an expression that doesn't quite belong to you. And the truly terrifying thought, maybe mirrors don't copy us, maybe they trap us. Maybe the person who first looked into the mirror never really left, and what came out was something else. So when you step away, when you turn your back, are you still the one outside? The screaming earth. The world is not silent, it is constantly crying out. We just don't hear it. Ancient myths spoke of the earth as a living being, a mother, a god, a force with its own will. But what if it's more than that? What if the planet itself is in pain? What if every earthquake, every volcanic eruption, every shifting of the land is not just a natural event, but a reaction, a scream? Modern science has proven that the earth emits sounds, low, deep vibrations, inaudible to human ears. Some claim that these sounds are the echoes of pressure and heat, but others believe they are something else entirely. If the earth is alive, then it must have thoughts, emotions, experiences. And if it feels the things we do to it, then what we hear, the grinding of tectonic plates, the roar of lava, the deep, eerie tones recorded in the depths of the ocean, might not be random at all. Maybe they are words, maybe they are warnings. And if the earth is screaming, who or what is supposed to be listening? The king that never dies. Some rulers never truly leave their throne. There are whispers of kings who never died, leaders whose spirits refused to move on. Some were too powerful, too feared, too obsessed with control. Death was just another obstacle for them to conquer. In ancient times, the concept of the eternal king appeared over and over again. Some said these kings had made deals with gods or demons, trading their mortality for power. Others believed they had been cursed, forced to linger as shadows of their former selves, watching their kingdoms rot around them. And in some cases, the truth was even darker. Maybe their bodies perished, but something else took their place, wearing their face, ruling in silence. What if some of them still rule today? Not as men, but as ideas, institutions, forces that refuse to fade. What if the king that never dies isn't just one person, but a cycle, a presence that moves from one leader to the next, never letting go of its grip on the world? And what if one day it decides to reclaim its throne in full? The unfinished creation. Not all things were meant to be completed. Every civilization has a creation story. Gods shaping the world, forces bringing order to chaos, humanity given a purpose. But what if creation was never actually finished? What if something interrupted the process? Something that left the world half-formed, flawed, incomplete. Some ancient beliefs suggested that we live in an imperfect draft of reality, not the final version. Maybe the original creator abandoned the project. Maybe the process was hijacked by lesser beings who didn't know how to finish it properly. Or worse, maybe we were never meant to exist at all. Maybe we are the mistake. Look around. So much of existence feels like a contradiction. Life fueled by death, intelligence that leads to destruction, emotions that bring pain. If a perfect creator made this world, why is it so broken? Unless, of course, they never got to finish the job. And if that's the case, does something still linger, waiting to complete what was started? Or did the creator leave for a reason? Because something went wrong with the design? The dust of the forgotten. History doesn't just disappear, it's erased. There are names that were once spoken every day, but have now been lost forever. Not because of time, but because something wanted them to be forgotten. The ancients feared this. They believed that when a person's name is forgotten, so is their soul. The memory of them is what keeps them real, even in death. But some names, they were removed on purpose. Entire civilizations have vanished without a trace. Stories that should have been passed down simply weren't. Structures, artifacts, ideas, gone as if they were never there. But who or what is doing the erasing? Maybe history isn't written by the victors. Maybe history is written by something older, something that decides which stories should not be remembered. Maybe forgetting isn't an accident. Maybe it's a punishment. And the worst part, how many times has this already happened? How many names, how many faces, how many entire realities have already turned to dust? The secret fire. Some flames do not burn for warmth. Ancient texts speak of a fire that does not consume, a flame that does not flicker. It is not the fire of destruction, but of transformation. It does not burn the body, it burns something deeper. The self, the soul, the very essence of what makes you you. Legends tell of those who sought this fire, believing it could purify them, elevate them, turn them into something more. But none of them returned the same. Some came back empty, hollowed out by something they couldn't explain. Others came back with knowledge they were never meant to have, knowledge that unravelled them. What if this fire is real? What if it exists somewhere, hidden in a place few have dared to reach? What if it does not simply purify, but rewrites? And what if someone somewhere has already used it? The speaking wounds? Not all scars fade. Some tell stories that were never meant to be told. The ancients believed wounds carried memory. That pain, once inflicted, never truly left. It lingered, waiting, watching, whispering. Some said a wound could remember the moment it was made, that if you listened closely, it would tell you how it happened, who inflicted it, why it never healed. Some wounds never close because they are not meant to. They stay open, like mouths, like warnings, like something that has more to say. Some injuries keep hurting, not because the body is broken, but because something else is using them as a voice. And what about the wounds of the world? The scars on the land, the ruins of fallen cities, The craters where things once stood. What if those are speaking too? What if we've simply forgotten how to listen? The child that was never born. Some lives were meant to exist, some were never supposed to be. There are stories of children who were never born, yet still left traces behind. Footsteps in empty rooms, names whispered by no one. Parents haunted by the feeling that someone should be there. The ancient ones believed that souls exist before birth, waiting for their time. But what happens when that time never comes? Some say these souls do not simply fade, they linger, unseen, incomplete. They drift between worlds, never fully alive, never fully dead. They are not ghosts, because they never had a life to leave behind. They are something else, something unfinished. And the most terrifying thought? Maybe some of them don't just wait. Maybe they still try to be born. Maybe they look for ways to return, to claim a body, to take the place of those who are meant to be. And if that's true, how many of us were supposed to be someone else? The Sleeping Colossus. Not all giants are myths, some are just waiting. Ancient stories speak of enormous beings, gods, titans, creatures too vast to comprehend. Some were destroyed, some vanished, and some, they say, never died at all. They simply went to sleep beneath mountains, oceans, and deserts, their bodies becoming part of the landscape itself. What if the mountains we climb are the spines of something ancient? What if the valleys we settle in are the spaces between ribs, the hollows where a heart once beat? What if the ocean floors we map are just the backs of things that have yet to wake? The terrifying thought is not just that they exist, but that they are only resting, that every earthquake, every unexplained tremor, every movement beneath the surface is not the shifting of rock and water, but the stirring of something old. What happens when they finally open their eyes? The time that repeats wrongly. History doesn't just repeat, it twists. The ancients believed in cycles. Empires rise and fall. Generations repeat mistakes, and time itself moves in loops. But what if these loops are not perfect? What if every repetition is slightly off? Maybe things are supposed to happen a certain way, but something is breaking the pattern. Maybe the reason we feel déjà vu is because we have been here before, just not quite like this. Maybe every timeline is a corrupted copy of the last, deteriorating over and over, distorting reality more and more with each reset. How many times have we lived this life? How many times has history played out, but wrong? And what if one day the loop fails entirely, leaving us stuck in a version of reality that was never meant to be? The inverted soul. Not all souls are where they belong. Some people feel off, not just in personality, but in existence itself. They don't connect to the world the way others do. They feel detached, misplaced, wrong. Maybe it's because their soul is not aligned with their body. Maybe it's because their soul is inverted. Ancient beliefs suggested that the soul has a natural order, a way it is supposed to fit with the world. But what if some souls were flipped inside out? What if they were born wrong? Not because of fate, but because of something deeper, something we don't understand. Maybe that explains why some people seem empty, why some feel like they're only half present, why some struggle with an overwhelming sense that they do not belong. Because, in a way, they don't. And the worst part, if an inverted soul can exist, then there must be something else, somewhere, someone, who has the opposite piece. What happens if they find each other? The black ocean. Not all waters lead to land, some lead to nowhere. The ancients feared the deep sea, not just because of storms and monsters, but because they believed the ocean had secrets. Some waters, they said, had no bottom. Some waves led not to another shore, but to something else. What if the ocean is not just a body of water, but a barrier? What if beyond it, beneath it, inside it, there is another world? Not just a place of strange creatures, but something more, something wrong. There are reports of entire ships disappearing without a trace, of sailors seeing lights beneath the waves that should not be there, of divers descending into darkness, only to feel something staring back? What if the ocean is not a place of life but of hunger? And what if one day it decides to let something come back? The parasitic mind. Not all thoughts are your own. There are moments when a thought enters your head so suddenly, so sharply, that it feels foreign. A dark impulse, a voice whispering an idea that isn't yours, a feeling of unease as if something is thinking through you. What if those thoughts don't come from your subconscious? What if they come from something else? The ancients believed that spirits could attach themselves to people, feeding off their energy, whispering into their thoughts, pushing them toward actions that weren't theirs. Today we might call them intrusive thoughts, but what if they aren't? What if there are beings that don't need a body, only a mind to inhabit? And what happens when they stop whispering and start taking control? The laughing abyss. Some things in the universe don't just exist, they enjoy it. The ancients feared the void, the spaces beyond the stars, the depths of the world that light never touched. But some believed the abyss wasn't empty. It wasn't cold. It wasn't indifferent. It was aware. And worse, it was amused. What if the universe isn't ruled by order, morality, or even chaos, but by something that laughs? What if all our suffering, our struggles, our triumphs, are just entertainment, a cosmic joke we were never meant to understand? There are moments when life feels unreal, when everything seems absurd, when tragedy is so cruel it borders on comedy. Maybe that feeling isn't an illusion. Maybe it's the closest thing to the truth. Maybe the abyss isn't silent. Maybe it's laughing. And maybe, just maybe, it's laughing at us. The whispering ashes. Fire consumes, but some things remain, and sometimes they speak. Across cultures, fire has been seen as both a destroyer and a purifier. But what if it does more than that? What if it records? There are whispers that the ashes of the burned retain their memories, that if you listen closely, the soot and dust will murmur. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's something deeper, something still there, trapped in the remnants. Some say you should never disturb the ashes of the dead, that they can still feel, that they remember the flames, that they remember you. And the scariest thought? What if fire doesn't just erase? What if it preserves? What if every scream, every last thought, every desperate plea before the end, still lingers in the embers? The false heavens. Not all afterlives are paradise, some are traps. Many religions promise a reward after death, and a place of peace, of rest, of divine presence. But what if some of these heavens aren't real? What if they were constructed? What if something else built them? Imagine dying and finding yourself in paradise. But something is off. The sky feels painted. The trees never move in the wind. The people around you smile, but their eyes are empty. You were promised eternity, but eternity starts to feel wrong. Some ancient thinkers feared this possibility, that there are afterlives designed not to reward, but to contain, to keep souls trapped, feeding something with their faith, their love, their obedience. And the worst part, if you find yourself in a false heaven, how would you ever escape? The devouring moon. The moon watches, but does it feed? Ancient cultures worshipped the moon, feared it, studied its cycles, but some believed it was more than just a rock in the sky. Some believed it was alive, and some believed it was hungry. Think about it. The moon controls the tides, pulling entire oceans toward it. What if it pulls at more than just water? What if it feeds on energy, on life, on the thoughts and dreams of those who sleep beneath it? What if the reason we feel different under a full moon isn't just superstition, but because something is taking from us? And what happens when it finally takes enough? The word that ends time. Some knowledge should never be spoken. There are stories of ancient texts, forbidden languages, sounds that should never be uttered, not because they summon demons, not because they bring curses, but because they break reality itself. What if time is held together by words? What if the universe is a language a script written by forces beyond our understanding? And what if, somewhere hidden in history, there is a single word that unwrites it? The ancients whispered of lost syllables, utterances that could unravel existence. Maybe they were erased from history on purpose. Maybe those who knew them were erased as well. But what if someone finds it? What if someone says it? And what if in that moment everything just stops? The spiral of the ancestors. The past is not behind us. It is beneath us, wrapped around us, watching through our own eyes. Many ancient cultures believed that time was not a straight line, but a spiral, a loop that winds inwards, forever repeating but never in quite the same way. Our ancestors do not disappear. They remain, their stories replaying through us, their choices shaping ours, their unfinished thoughts whispering in the spaces between moments. What if we are not truly separate from them? What if our minds are layered over theirs, each new generation built on the echoes of the last? Maybe when we make decisions, they are not entirely ours. Maybe they are nudges, shadows of choices made long ago, pulling us toward an inevitable repetition. Some say that déjà vu is not a trick of the mind, but a glimpse of the spiral turning again, replaying what has already happened, forcing us down paths that have been walked before. And what happens when the spiral tightens, when history folds onto itself and the past starts leaking into the present? What if the dead are not behind us but circling closer? And what if we are just their next attempt at getting it right? The watching stars. They are too far to touch, too far to hear, but maybe not too far to see. Since the beginning of time, humans have looked up at the stars, seeking meaning, guidance, answers. But what if they are not just lifeless balls of fire? What if they are looking back? There have always been stories of celestial beings, watchers in the heavens, deities who observe but never interfere. But some ancient texts hint at something darker, that the stars are not gods, not guardians, but eyes. That the reason we feel so small beneath them is because we were meant to. Some say that when you stare at the night sky too long, you start to feel something, a presence, a pressure in the back of your mind, as if something enormous has noticed you. Maybe this is why some places fear certain constellations, why there are myths of stars that blink, of celestial bodies that disappear and return without explanation. What if the stars are not just watching? What if they are waiting? And what if one night they decide to come closer? The erosion of reality. The world is coming apart. Slowly, subtly, piece by piece, reality is wearing thin. We assume the laws of physics are unbreakable, that the universe is stable, that existence is what it is. But what if it isn't? What if the very fabric of reality is like stone in the wind, crumbling, eroding, fading? Some ancient philosophers believed that the world is less real than it used to be, that with each passing age, with each generation, something is lost. Not just knowledge, not just memory, but actual substance. People in the past spoke of gods walking the earth, of magic shaping the world, of things that should not be possible. What if they were not just myths? What if they were remembering something true, a world that was more real than the one we have now? Maybe this is why some things don't make sense anymore, why we forget names, why places change, why the universe feels thin in certain moments, like something is missing, like something is fraying at the edges. And what happens when too much has eroded? What happens when there is nothing left to hold on to? The eyes in the dark. The darkness is never empty. For as long as humans have existed, we have feared the dark, not because of what we imagine could be there, but because deep down, we know something is, something that has always been just beyond the light, watching, waiting, breathing in the silence. There are places where the shadows feel too deep, where the dark feels heavy, where stepping too far in feels like stepping out of reality. Some say these places are cursed. Others say they are simply occupied. The scariest part? The eyes in the dark never reveal themselves. They do not chase. They do not attack. They do not even move. They only watch. Why? Maybe they are waiting for something. Maybe they are deciding something. Or maybe, just maybe, they are waiting for you to finally notice them. And the moment you do, it's already too late. The drowned gods. They were here before us. They ruled before us. They fell before us. Ancient civilizations spoke of gods who came from the sea, who controlled the tides, who whispered in the depths. But some also spoke of gods who had been cast down, forgotten beings who were drowned, buried beneath the waves, their names wiped from history. But what if gods do not die the way mortals do? What if they are simply waiting? The ocean is deep. There are places no human has ever seen, trenches that stretch into blackness where even light does not reach. What if at the bottom something still lingers? Something enormous, something old, something hungry. Some believe the ocean calls to us for a reason. That the reason we dream of drowning, the reason we are drawn to the sea despite its dangers, is because something wants us to come closer. And what if one day it calls loud enough for us to listen? The crawling mist. It does not move like the wind. It does not shift like a cloud. The mist has intent. Since ancient times, fog and mist have been seen as omens, barriers between the seen and unseen, between the living and the dead. But some stories go further. Some tell of a mist that does not simply roll in with the weather but hunts. It creeps low to the ground, silent, patient. It is not bound by the natural world. It moves into places it should not reach, indoors, underground, through locked doors and shut windows. It follows certain people, whispering as it wraps around them, blinding them, separating them from the world. And then, when the mist clears, they are gone. Some say it is not mist at all, but something that only takes the form of mist, something old, something hungry, something that chooses. It does not take, at random. It picks those who stray too far from safety, those who walk alone in the early hours, those who dare to ask the wrong questions about what lies beyond the veil. And the scariest part? If you breathe it in, if it enters you, then it does not need to take you anywhere, because it has already taken you. The hidden sentence. Words have power, but some words should never be spoken. There is a phrase, a sequence of sounds, a pattern of letters lost to time. Not because it was forgotten, but because it was removed. The ancients spoke of knowledge so dangerous that it could not simply be hidden. It had to be erased, cut from history, stripped from every mind that once held it. Not because it summoned demons, not because it cursed those who spoke it, but because it was true. This sentence, they said, contains something humanity was never meant to know. Something that, once spoken, could unravel reality itself. It was not magic. It was not divine. It was simply wrong. A flaw in the fabric of existence. A weakness in the illusion of order. Some say it was a name. Some say it was a question. Others claim it was an answer. But here's the terrifying thought. If the sentence was erased, that means someone, somewhere, once knew it. And what happens if, one day, we discover it again? The fractured soul. Some wounds do not bleed, some shatter. Many cultures believed the soul was a single, unbreakable thing, pure, whole, eternal. But some ancient philosophers suggested otherwise, that the soul, like the body, could be damaged, that it could crack, splinter, even be divided into pieces, and when that happens, a person is never the same again. What if this explains the feeling of being incomplete, the strange sense that a part of you is missing, even if you don't know what? Maybe it is missing. Maybe it was broken in a past life. Maybe it was stolen. Maybe it was given away without realizing the cost. And what about those who feel nothing at all? The empty ones, the ones who seem distant, hollow, unfeeling. What if they are not cruel or cold by choice? What if they simply do not have a soul to feel with anymore? The ancients believed that a fractured soul could be repaired, but only by finding the missing pieces. And if that's true, where do those missing pieces go? The red sky prophecy. When the sky turns red, the world will change. Every civilization has warned of an omen in the sky. Some say it is the end of an age, others say it is the beginning of something worse. But nearly all agree on one thing. When the sky turns red, everything is about to shift. It has happened before. Records of crimson horizons, of the sun bleeding over landscapes in unnatural ways. Some blamed volcanoes, others comets, but there are those who claim it was something else. A warning, a sign that reality itself had tilted, that something ancient had stirred beneath the surface. Some cultures believed the red sky was not a natural event, but a signal. That when the sky turns that colour, something is watching. That the shift in light is not just atmospheric, but spiritual. A moment where the walls between this world and another weaken, where things slip through unseen. The true horror of the prophecy is not that the sky changes colour. It is what follows afterward. Civilizations collapse. Leaders go mad. People vanish, rewritten by something that does not belong here. And the worst part, the sky has turned red before, and each time history was never the same again. The masked men. They do not speak, they do not break their gaze, they are always there. There are stories, across continents and centuries, of figures dressed in perfect, expressionless masks. They do not belong to any known culture, any historical group, any civilization that left records. And yet people continue to see them. They appear at the edges of crowds, watching but never interacting. They stand at the corners of streets at night, motionless, as if waiting for something. They are not hostile. They are not violent. They are simply present. And for some reason that is worse. The strangest part, no two people seem to describe the same masks. Some say they are white and blank. Others say they have faces that shift when you look away. Some claim the masks smile, but never in a way that feels human. There are theories, but no answers. Some say they are ancient, part of a forgotten order that has existed longer than any kingdom. Some say they are placeholders, stand-ins for something that was erased, something that no longer belongs but refuses to leave. And then there's the most unsettling theory of all. What if they are not watching us? What if they are watching for something else? The hollow ones. They look like us, they talk like us, but inside there is nothing. Every civilization has stories of people who seem wrong, not just cruel or strange, but fundamentally empty. The kind of people you meet once and immediately forget, or the ones who smile in a way that doesn't quite reach their eyes. Some ancient beliefs held that these people were not really people at all, but hollow. What does it mean to be hollow? Some say it's a curse. Something stripped them of their soul, leaving only a body going through the motions. Others believe it's intentional, that some people are created empty as a kind of experiment, a shell without true consciousness, mimicking what it means to be human, but never fully understanding it. The scariest theory? Maybe they used to be real. Maybe they were normal once, full of thoughts and feelings and dreams. But something took that from them. Something reached inside, pulled out whatever made them, and left only the shape behind. And if that's true, what happens if it comes for the rest of us? The mouth beneath the city. It is hungry, it always has been. Cities grow on top of ruins, on top of history, on top of something older. But some cities, some places, were built in the wrong spot. Some were built over something that was never supposed to be buried, something that is still alive, something that still wants. People disappear. Entire blocks feel off. Buildings collapse for no reason. Streets crack in patterns that don't make sense. Some people swear they hear things. Low, deep vibrations at night, like distant breathing. Water drains too quickly. Sound doesn't echo the way it should. The most disturbing idea, what if this thing beneath the city is not just a presence, but a being? A mouth that never stops feeding, devouring not just people, but memories, places, entire eras of history. And maybe that's why some disappearances leave no trace, not because they were taken, but because they were swallowed whole. The wells that breathe. Some wells are not just holes in the ground, some are alive. Throughout history, wells were seen as sacred places, gateways to the underworld, passages to unseen forces. But there are stories, old buried stories, about wells that don't simply provide water. They inhale, stand too close and you might feel it. A shift in the air, a pull, a faint movement that should not be there. Some wells have been found to make noises at night, deep groans or sighs from something below. People drop stones into them and never hear a splash. Some wells were sealed, not because they dried up, but because something was coming out. Something that was never meant to touch the surface. The most horrifying theory, not all of them were closed, and some are still breathing. The black sun. Light does not always bring warmth, sometimes it brings something else. Most civilizations worship the sun, seeing it as a source of life, growth and power. But some ancient texts speak of a second sun, one that is unseen, one that does not shine in the way we understand. The black sun. It is not dark in colour, nor does it exist in the night sky. It is something outside the visible spectrum, something that influences reality in ways we do not fully grasp. Some believe it is a hidden force, affecting time, fate, even thoughts. Others say it appears only in moments of great change, when reality is shifting, when the world is about to break. There are rare accounts of people claiming to have felt the black sun rather than seen it. They describe a deep sense of unease, as if something vast and unknowable had turned its attention toward them, as if their lives were no longer entirely their own. And the most chilling part, some cultures believed that one day the black sun would replace the real one, that when it finally reveals itself, there will be no dawn, no light, no warmth, only a shadow that stretches across everything. The unfinished death. Not everyone who dies is truly gone. We think of death as an ending, a transition, a finality. But what if it isn't? What if some people do not complete the process? What if they are caught between not alive, not dead, but in a state of incompleteness? There are ancient beliefs that certain deaths do not count, that if someone is taken too soon, too violently, too unnaturally, their soul is paused rather than freed. These are not ghosts. Ghosts have stories. Ghosts have presence. But those who suffer the unfinished death, they do not haunt, they simply wait. Wait for what? Maybe for the moment they were meant to die, maybe for their existence to be corrected, or maybe, just maybe, they are seeking a way to finish what was started. And if they cannot, perhaps they must take someone else's place. The womb of the void. Not all things are born into the world, some are born outside it. There are ancient myths of gods and monsters emerging from nothingness, from the gaps between existence, from the places where reality has no hold. But what if these stories weren't just metaphors? What if the void, true endless nothingness, is not empty, but pregnant? The ancients feared what lurked beyond the stars, not because it was unknown, but because it was waiting to be known. What if existence itself is an infection, spreading outward, disturbing something that was never meant to awaken? And what if, in response, the void is creating something built to correct the imbalance, to return things to silence? What does it mean to be born from nothing, a being with no past, no origin, no ties to anything familiar? Some believe that such entities have already arrived, hidden among us, unnoticed because they were never meant to be seen. And perhaps the only way to recognize them is to understand one terrifying truth. They do not belong, not to this world, not to any world, but one day they will. And when they do, nothing will remain unchanged. The forgotten bones. Some skeletons tell stories, others were meant to be forgotten. Archaeologists have unearthed remains that do not fit into history. Skulls with no known ancestry. Skeletons buried too deep for recorded time. Bones found in places where no human should have been. There are stories, whispered, buried, of discoveries that were covered up, skeletons that were found, studied, and and then sealed away. Not because they were ancient, but because they were impossible. Who were these people? Were they people at all? Some believe they belonged to a past civilization, one that predated all others, wiped from memory for reasons unknown. Others say they were not before us, but beside us, another species, another kind of being that once shared the world, before something decided they should no longer exist. And the most disturbing thought, if their bones were erased from history, it was because someone, or something, did not want us to know they were ever here. The eternal visitors. They never truly leave. There are legends of strange figures appearing throughout history. Travellers with no past, strangers who know too much, wanderers whose presence lingers long after they have disappeared. Some say they are immortals, others claim they are something worse, something that exists outside of time, slipping in and out of history without ever belonging to it. The most unsettling part, they are always watching. Old stories describe figures in distant crowds, in paintings, in written records that span centuries. Always similar, always present, yet never explained. Some cultures believed they were messengers, waiting for the right moment to intervene. Others feared they were something else entirely, something that does not age, does not change, does not belong, but is always there. And here's the real question. If they are visitors, then where is their home? And more importantly, what are they waiting for? The ghosts of the unborn. A soul exists before a body, but what happens when the body never comes? There have always been stories of spirits, those who linger after death refusing to move on. But some believed in a different kind of ghost, not of the dead, but of the never born. Souls that were meant to exist, meant to be given form, but never were. Mothers have reported dreams of children they never had, visions of tiny hands reaching out from the darkness. Some feel a presence in their homes, a lingering sadness that cannot be explained. Others hear soft cries in the night, voices that do not belong to the living. Are these just memories of lost possibilities, or are they something more, something real? If a soul is created before a body, then perhaps some souls never find one. Perhaps they remain, drifting, waiting, searching for something they were promised but never received. And what happens when one of them decides it is tired of waiting? What happens when it chooses to take what was denied to it? The reversed flesh. What if the body you wear was never meant to be yours? The ancients believed that the soul and body were connected, that each was made for the other. But there are darker stories, whispered ones, of flesh that does not belong to the soul inside it. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that your reflection looks off, not just tired, not just aged, but wrong. Your hands feel unfamiliar. Your voice sounds strange. Your memories are yours, but they feel like they happened to someone else. What if this is not just paranoia? What if, somehow, your body was switched, taken, borrowed, replaced? Some people claim to have memories of other lives, of faces they do not recognize but know they have seen before. Others wake from dreams where they were someone else, only to look in the mirror and feel a deep, sinking sense of wrongness. What if, in the deep mechanisms of reality, in the hidden functions of existence, bodies are recycled? What if the flesh remembers what the soul does not? And what if the original owner of your body decides they want it back? The roots that move. Not all things in nature stay where they are planted. Trees are supposed to be still, grounded, permanent. But some ancient stories tell of roots that shift when no one is looking, creeping beneath the earth, stretching toward places they were never meant to reach. In some forests, people swear that paths change overnight, that trees rearrange themselves, that no map can ever be trusted. It's as if the land itself is alive, as if the roots are searching for something. What if they are? There are old legends of forests that consume entire villages, not with fire, not with storms, but with growth. Houses swallowed by creeping vines, roads cracked open by roots, entire settlements vanishing as the trees close in. Maybe it's not just nature reclaiming land. Maybe it's something older, something that was here first, something that is slowly waking up. And what if it doesn't just move beneath the soil? What if one day you hear the sound of roots shifting inside your walls, beneath your bed? And what if they are not just growing, but reaching for you? The house that hunts. A home is supposed to be a place of safety. But what if some houses are alive? There are places where people go missing, houses that stand empty no matter how many families move in. Some buildings seem wrong, not haunted, not cursed, but predatory. The doors shift when you're not looking. The hallways seem longer at night. The windows show things that aren't outside. What if houses are not just shelters? What if, in some rare and terrible cases, they are traps? Some say that certain homes feed on those who enter, that the walls drink in sound, that the floors absorb footsteps, that the very foundation remembers everyone who has ever stepped inside. But instead of ghosts, these houses have something else: hunger. And the worst part? You don't realise you're trapped until it's too late, because by the time you understand what the house wants, it already has you. The talking skin. Your body is not silent. It speaks, it remembers. It tells stories you don't understand. Scars remain long after wounds heal. Birthmarks appear without reason. Some people develop strange patterns on their skin, lines, shapes, symbols, that no one can explain. What if these marks are not random? What if they are messages? The ancients believed that the body was a map, that markings on the skin were clues to past lives, destinies, forgotten sins. Some cultures feared that tattoos and scars could change more than just appearance, that they could awaken something hidden beneath the surface. But what if it goes deeper? What if your skin remembers things that your mind does not? Some people report feeling sensations from wounds they never received. Others claim that certain marks move, shift, or even grow over time. What if the body holds on to knowledge that was never meant to be known? What if, late at night, in complete silence, your skin is whispering truths you cannot hear? And what if, one day, you wake up and understand what it's saying? The dark mathematics. Numbers were never meant to be understood by humans. Mathematics is the language of the universe, the foundation of everything. But some ancient thinkers warned that numbers do not just describe reality, they shape it. Some equations are never meant to be solved. Some patterns, once recognized, change the way the world works. There are whispers of forbidden calculations, numbers that drive people insane when they comprehend them. Sequences that, once written down, begin to rewrite reality itself. People who have looked too deep into certain mathematical structures have vanished without explanation. Some claim that numbers are alive, that they are watching, that they are waiting for someone to uncover the final perfect equation. What happens when we find it? What if numbers are not tools of understanding but keys? And what if we are not meant to open the door? The sickness that dreams. Some diseases do not just attack the body, they change the mind. Throughout history, people have reported strange illnesses, fevers that bring visions, infections that whisper in the night, plagues that leave the sick different once they recover. Some believe that certain diseases are not just biological but spiritual, that they do not simply harm the body, they open it. What if illness is not always accidental? What if some things want to infect us? Some cultures spoke of fevers that allow people to see beyond reality, of infections that bring knowledge instead of death. Others warned of plagues that were not meant to kill, but to transform. Those who survive are never the same. Their thoughts are not their own. Their dreams begin to align. They speak of things they should not know, things no one should know. And the truly terrifying question is this: did the sickness leave them, or did it replace them? The dead that won't stay silent. The dead are supposed to rest, but some refuse. Every culture has stories of restless spirits, ghosts, phantoms, echoes of those who have passed. But what if it's not just about unfinished business? What if the dead do not want to be silent? What if they are not allowed to be? There are whispers of places where the voices of the dead seep through the walls, where the ground itself murmurs with the weight of those buried beneath. Some claim that certain names, when spoken, bring voices with them, whispers, warnings, pleas. Others say that cemeteries are not just burial grounds, but waiting rooms. What if the dead do not move on because they can't? What if they know something we don't, something so terrifying that they refuse to fade away? Maybe they are trying to tell us something. Maybe the silence of the grave is not natural, but forced. Maybe the dead were never meant to be quiet, and the only reason they seem silent now is because something else is drowning them out. The echoes of future deaths. Some people don't just fear death, they hear it coming. There have been accounts scattered across history of people hearing their own deaths before they happen. A sound in the distance, a scream that doesn't belong to anyone living, a whisper of their name spoken in a voice they do not recognise. Some dismiss it as paranoia. Others say it is an echo, a ripple from a moment that has not yet arrived. What if time is not as stable as we think? What if death is so final, so powerful, that its presence is felt before it happens? Some say that accidents, tragedies, even wars can be sensed in the days or hours before they occur, as if reality is trying to warn us. But what if it's not a warning? What if those echoes aren't coming from the future, but from something that exists outside of time? What if death in some form is already here, already watching, already whispering to those whose time is almost up? And if that's true, how many of us have already heard our own ending without realising what it was? The ruins that build themselves. Some places do not decay, they grow. Ruins are supposed to be remnants of the past, crumbling pieces of civilizations long gone. But there are ruins, silent, forgotten places, where the stone does not erode, but changes. New structures appear where none existed before. Old pathways shift. Walls that were cracked yesterday seem untouched today. What if these places are not abandoned? What if they are alive? There are stories of lost travellers stumbling into ruins that should not exist, of entire cities found in the middle of nowhere with no record of ever being built. Some say the ruins themselves are watching, expanding, shifting, when no one is looking. Others believe that something, some unseen force, is still building them. Maybe ruins are not memories of the past, but blueprints for the future. Maybe what we call abandoned is really something unfinished, something waiting for the right moment to complete itself. And the real question is, who or what is doing the building? The river of unborn tears. Not all rivers carry water, some carry something else. There are old stories, rare, almost erased, of a river that does not flow through any map, a river that no one alive has ever seen. Some call it a myth, a metaphor for lost potential, but others claim it is real, a river that carries not the souls of the dead, but those who are never born. It is said that when you stand near this river, if you ever find it, you do not hear rushing water. You hear crying, not loud, not desperate, but soft, gentle sobs carried on the wind, the voices of those who were meant to live but never did. Some were lost before birth, some were never conceived at all, but all of them remember. The most disturbing thought. Some say that the river does not just carry them, it collects them, that they drift unseen, waiting for something, searching for something. And every so often, when the time is right, one of them finds a way to cross over. The architects of flesh. Not all builders use stone. Every great civilization has left behind structures that baffle historians. Walls that should not stand, monoliths too heavy to move, temples that align perfectly with the stars. But some ancient myths tell of builders who did not use materials from the earth. They used living things. What if there were beings, long before recorded history, who understood how to shape flesh the way we shape metal? Who could bend the body, stretch it, twist it, construct something greater from the pieces of what was once human? Some believe that certain artifacts, certain relics, were never made from wood or stone at all, that beneath layers of dust and time, something else remains, something that still breathes, something that still remembers what it was before it was used. And what if those ancient architects are not gone? What if they are just waiting for more material? The silent war. Wars are supposed to be fought with armies, weapons, and blood, but some wars never make it into history books. Some wars happen in the shadows, in the unseen spaces between reality and something else. There are stories, strange, scattered, and often dismissed, of a war that has been raging for centuries, maybe even longer. A war that doesn't play out on battlefields, but in the hidden layers of existence. Some believe it is fought between ancient forces, neither good nor evil, but so far beyond human comprehension that we can barely perceive their movements. What if the world around us, the changes in history, the unexplained disappearances, the sudden collapses of civilizations, are not accidents? What if they are the consequences of battles we aren't supposed to know about? Wars fought through influence, through erasing people from time, through altering reality itself? Some believe that every now and then, evidence slips through, a moment where the fabric of this conflict touches our world, a person who remembers an event that never happened, a book that contains knowledge no one should have, a place that exists in records but not in reality. And if this war has been going on for so long, the real question is, are we just bystanders, or are we already part of the battlefield? The forgotten sun. There was once another sun in the sky, and then it was erased. This is not just myth. Some of the oldest cultures have references, barely noticeable, almost hidden, to a second sun. A twin, a lost celestial body that once shone down upon the earth. But if it was real, where did it go? Some say it was destroyed in a cataclysm, but others have a more disturbing theory. It was taken away. By whom? By what? And more importantly, why? Maybe the missing sun wasn't a sun at all, but something else, something that watched over the world in a way our current sun never could. Maybe it saw too much. Maybe it was removed to keep us from knowing something we were never meant to understand. And if there was once a second sun, what happens if it comes back? The dust that remembers. Dust is supposed to be meaningless, the final remnants of things that once were. But what if dust remembers? Think about it. Dust is made of everything. Old books, lost civilizations, forgotten bones. It has travelled through centuries, through ruins, through the air itself. It has settled in places where great things happened, where terrible things happened. What if it keeps those memories? Some ancient cultures believed that dust was more than just decay. It was evidence. That if you could listen, really listen, the dust would whisper the history of where it had been. Some claimed that certain places, old libraries, forgotten temples, abandoned cities, held dust that still murmured with the voices of those long gone. And what if those voices aren't just echoes? What if they are watching, waiting, remembering, for someone to finally hear them? The stagnant souls. Not all souls move on. Some spirits haunt, some linger, some return in new bodies, but there are others that do nothing. They do not fade, do not pass through the veil, do not even realise they are dead. They are trapped, locked in an unchanging state, as if frozen in the moment of their last breath. What if these souls are not stuck because of unfinished business, but because something stopped them from moving? Some ancient beliefs spoke of a force, not a god, not a demon, but something fundamental that could prevent a soul from reaching its destination. Some said it was punishment. Others said it was a mistake in the fabric of reality, a flaw in the system of life and death. And then there are those who believe that stagnant souls are being kept, harvested, preserved, for a purpose no living mind can understand. Maybe this explains why some places feel so still, so heavy, as if something is watching but never acting. Maybe these souls are not lingering because they want to. Maybe they are waiting for something to come claim them. The unfinished language. Not all languages are meant to be spoken. There are words we know, languages we learn, alphabets we can decipher. But some languages were never meant to be completed. Some were cut off before they could be fully written, erased before they could be understood. Why? Some say there is an ancient language that, if spoken in full, would change the world. Not through magic, not through power, but through something deeper, through rewriting the very nature of reality. Maybe words are not just communication. Maybe they are the code that holds existence together. And what if this language was once known? What if the ancients tried to complete it, tried to unlock its final form, only to realise, too late, that some things should never be spoken? What if they didn't just forget it? What if they made sure no one would ever finish it? And the real question is, what happens if someone does? The gods that need us. We have always been told that we need the gods, that without them we are nothing. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if the gods need us? Across cultures, deities are worshipped through prayer, sacrifice, devotion. What if that isn't just tradition, but fuel? What if gods are not all-powerful beings, but entities that require belief to exist? What if every whispered prayer, every ritual, every temple built in their name is not an act of devotion, but of sustenance? Some ancient texts hint at this, stories of gods who grew weaker as their followers dwindled, of spirits that once ruled over vast lands but disappeared the moment their names were forgotten. If gods are truly divine, why would they care about worship? Why would they demand offerings? What if they are not ruling us, but feeding off us? And if they need us to survive, what happens when we stop believing? Do they wither away, or do they become desperate? What if forgotten gods don't just vanish? What if they hunt for new followers? And what if some of them are already watching, waiting for us to slip, just so they can whisper their names back into our minds? The black vortex. There is a hole in the universe, a place where time, space, and reality itself seem to bend. Some call it a void, a rupture, an anomaly, but others call it something worse. A vortex. Ancient civilizations spoke of places that should not exist, places where the stars themselves seemed wrong, where shadows stretched too far, where objects disappeared and never returned. Some believed these were gateways to other worlds, but others warned that they were something else entirely. Not doors, not passages, but hungry mouths. There are whispers of travellers who got too close, of ships that sailed into a blackness deeper than night and were never seen again. Some say these places are not natural, that they were not always there, that something put them there, waiting for things to wander too close. What if the universe is not just expanding, but unravelling? What if at the edges, where the fabric is weak, something is pulling it apart? And what happens when it starts pulling at us? The screaming paintings. Not all art is silent. Some pieces remember. There are paintings that have outlived their creators, that hang in darkened galleries, eyes following those who pass by. Some say they feel watched. Others claim the colours seem to shift when no one is looking. But the oldest and most terrifying stories speak of paintings that do something worse. They scream, not with sound, not with voices, but in ways that can still be felt. A scream in the mind, in the bones. A scream that lingers long after you've turned away. Some claim the paint itself is cursed, made from materials that should never have been mixed. Others say the artists went mad, trapping something inside their work, something that does not belong. There are paintings that have been locked away, buried, burned, only for copies to appear elsewhere, unchanged. It's as if they cannot be destroyed, as if they do not want to be destroyed. And the worst part? Some say that if you stare too long, if you listen too closely, you will understand the scream. And once you do, you will never hear silence again. The incomplete people. Some people don't feel whole, and maybe they aren't. We assume that every person is complete, that they are born with everything they are meant to have. Memories, emotions, a soul. But there are stories of people who are missing something. People who go through life never quite connecting, never quite feeling, as if a part of them never arrived. What if that's not just metaphor? What if some people weren't finished? Maybe the process of creation, whatever force makes us who we are, sometimes fails. Maybe some people are born without something essential. Not just emotions or personality, but something deeper. Maybe that explains the people who feel nothing, the ones who never dream, the ones who seem to move through the world like shadows. And what if they know? What if they can feel the absence? Some spend their lives searching for something, unable to describe what it is. Others simply stop, as if they were never meant to continue. As if at some point, reality will catch up with them and erase what was never supposed to be there. And the truly terrifying thought, what if some of them were complete once, and something took a piece away? The desert that remembers. Most landscapes are shaped by time, but some places remember. The desert is supposed to be empty, vast, silent, untouched. But there are places where the sand holds on to things that should have disappeared. Footprints that never fade, structures buried then uncovered, as if the land is spitting them back out. Some travellers claim to have seen mirages that were too detailed, too real, not tricks of the light but memories, battles replaying in the distance, cities that no longer exist, faces that appear in the dunes watching, waiting. What if the desert is not a wasteland, but a library? What if it does not erase the past, but stores it, burying it under shifting sands, keeping it locked away? And what if it only reveals these memories to certain people, at certain times? Maybe that's why some things resurface after centuries, perfectly preserved, as if time had no effect on them. Maybe the desert does not just remember, maybe it chooses what to bring back. And what if one day it decides to remember something that should have stayed forgotten? The skeleton that moves. Bones are supposed to stay still, but some refuse. Throughout history, stories have surfaced of bones that do not rest, not reanimated corpses, not the undead, but skeletons that move on their own. Graves unearthed with bones arranged in patterns, skeletal remains found far from where they were first buried, ancient tombs where something had shifted. What if bones do not just rot away? What if they remember? Some believe that bones hold on to energy, that they retain the last thoughts, the final emotions of the person they belong to. And sometimes those emotions are strong enough to linger. Maybe that's why we feel uneasy around certain remains, because we are not just looking at them, they are looking back. There are whispers of people who have seen bones move, not walking, not rising, but dragging themselves, inching forward, pulled by some unseen force. Some claim that they shift under the ground, trying to reach something they left behind. Others say they are searching for the rest of themselves, piecing themselves back together, bit by bit. And the most unsettling thought? What if a skeleton only needs enough pieces to come back? What if the body is just an illusion, and all it takes is one bone, one forgotten fragment, to awaken something that should have stayed buried? What happens when it finally finds everything it's looking for? The ever-watching eye. You are never truly alone. There are places, forgotten temples, ancient ruins, darkened forests, where people have reported the same feeling, being watched. Not by animals, not by people, but by something unseen, something immense. Some say it is a presence. Others swear they have seen it, a shape in the distance, a shadow cast by nothing. But the worst accounts are from those who see an eye. Not in the sky, not in the walls, in their own mind. A feeling that grows stronger the longer they stay in certain places, as if something has taken notice of them, as if something is testing them. What if this eye is not a symbol, not a metaphor, but real? Some cultures believed in gods who never spoke, who never interfered, but who observed. That their power was not in their actions, but in their gaze. That the more they watched you, the more real you became to them. And that's the terrifying part. Because if you feel this presence, if you see this eye in your mind, if you know without a doubt that something is watching you, that means it has noticed you. And once it has noticed you, it will never stop. The mind fog. Some thoughts are not your own. There are days when your mind feels wrong, You forget things too easily. Thoughts slip away before you can finish them. You feel like you're outside of yourself, watching your own life from a distance. What if that's not just exhaustion? What if something is inside your head? Ancient philosophers warned of forces that could cloud the mind. Not sickness, not magic, but something worse. A presence that lingers in thought itself, something that feeds on awareness. Some believed that this fog was not random, that it came in waves, targeting certain people, testing them. And if it finds you vulnerable, it does not just cloud your mind, it replaces it. People who suffer from this kind of fog report the same strange patterns. Memories that feel borrowed, moments of lost time, sudden emotions that make no sense. Some even claim they've woken up and felt like they were someone else entirely, only for the feeling to fade hours later. What if this fog is not just confusion? What if it's something trying to take over? And what happens when it decides to stay? The gods that forgot. Not all gods are all-knowing. Some forgot who they were. There are ancient myths of deities who faded, not because their followers abandoned them, but because they lost themselves. Gods who once ruled over vast domains, but whose names disappeared, not because of time, but because they forgot their own power. What happens when a god forgets? Maybe they become like us, wandering, lost, unaware of what they once were. Maybe they walk among us, unable to remember that they were once worshipped, that they once shaped reality itself. Or maybe the universe does not allow empty thrones. Maybe when a god forgets, something else takes its place. Some believe these lost gods still exist, trapped in a cycle of forgetting and remembering, flickering between divinity and mortality. Some say that they wake up in strange places, confused, disoriented, until something reminds them. A prayer spoken by accident, an old symbol drawn in the dirt, a song that carries echoes of their past. And the most terrifying thought, if a god can forget itself, what if it can forget us too? What happens to those who were created in its image? Do they disappear, or do they simply stop being real? The abandoned flesh. Your body is not always yours. There are stories of people waking up feeling wrong, not sick, not injured, but as if something has changed, as if the body they are in does not belong to them anymore. The texture of their skin feels off, their own hands seem unfamiliar, their voice sounds different. What if it's not just paranoia? What if at some point they were replaced? Some ancient cultures believed that flesh is not permanent, that bodies can be borrowed, rearranged, or even stolen, that some entities do not need to create their own forms, they can simply take the ones left behind. What happens when a body is no longer needed? Does it simply rot, forgotten? Or does something else claim it, slipping inside, wearing it like clothing? What if some people around us, people who seem normal, people we've known for years, are not who they used to be? Maybe they were left behind, abandoned by whatever once lived inside them. Maybe they are still waiting for something to return. Or maybe they have already been filled by something else. And the only reason they haven't said anything is because they don't know they were ever someone else. The frozen scream. A scream is supposed to fade, but some never do. There are places where sound lingers longer than it should. Echoes in empty halls, whispers in abandoned ruins, voices in the wind that have no source. But there are darker stories, ones that speak of screams that were never released, never allowed to escape the moment they were born. Some ancient beliefs warned that intense suffering could freeze sound itself, trapping it in the fabric of the world. That, in the right conditions, deep cold, absolute silence, unnatural stillness, a scream could be preserved, not as an echo, not as a memory, but as something alive, waiting to be heard. There are places where people swear they have heard it, low, distant, buried in ice. A scream that does not waver, that does not weaken, that does not belong to the present. Some claim it comes from frozen lakes, from glaciers, from ancient tombs sealed by permafrost. What happens when something trapped in the ice finally thaws? What if the scream is not just a sound, but a warning? And what if the thing that screamed is still down there, waiting to finish what it started. The forgotten prison. Some prisons hold more than criminals. Some are not built for people at all. There are stories, hidden, erased, of structures that were never meant to be discovered. Prisons built for beings that were never meant to be freed. Places that were locked long before written history. Their existence buried under cities, beneath forests, at the bottom of the sea. The terrifying part? Some of these places have been found, doors sealed with no keyhole, chains too large for any human body, cells built in the deepest, darkest places, as if whoever was trapped there was not just dangerous, but wrong. What if the reason we cannot find records of these places is because something made sure we forgot? What if the world as we know it is built on top of something ancient and imprisoned, something that must never be remembered? And what happens if the locks begin to fail? What happens when we are no longer able to forget? The shadows that speak. Darkness is supposed to be empty, but sometimes it whispers. Since the beginning of time, humans have feared the dark, not just because of what could be hiding in it, but because sometimes it is not hiding at all. There are reports scattered through history of shadows that move when they shouldn't, of shapes that do not belong to anything, of voices that come from places where no person stands. Some believe that shadows are not just the absence of light, but the presence of something else, something that exists only when it is unseen. What if, when we stand in darkness, we are not alone? There are stories of people hearing their own voice coming from behind them when no one is there, of whispers that start as nonsense but begin to make sense the longer they listen, of people who swear that their own shadow hesitated before moving with them. And the worst stories are from those who listen too closely, because the moment you understand what the shadows are saying, they know you can hear them, and they start speaking directly to you. The forbidden rite? Some rituals are not meant to be completed. There are scattered mentions across forgotten texts and buried ruins of rites that were never finished. Not because they failed, not because they were lost to time, but because they were stopped. What if some knowledge was not erased but intentionally left incomplete? There are accounts of rituals that required human sacrifice, not to summon something, but to keep something sealed. Others that demanded precise words, words that, if spoken in the wrong order, would undo the world itself. Some believe that the reason certain languages have disappeared is because they contained syllables that were too dangerous to speak. But there is always the risk of someone trying to finish what should never have been started. Maybe that's why some people feel drawn to old ruins, why they dream of symbols they have never seen before. Maybe the knowledge is pushing back, waiting for someone to remember. And what happens when they do? What happens when the last missing piece is finally spoken aloud? What happens when the rite is completed? The black mask. A mask is meant to hide, but some masks do more than that. Throughout history, masks have been used in rituals, in ceremonies, in war. But there are stories, hidden ones, of a mask that does not just cover the face, but becomes it. There are whispers of people who wore a certain mask and were never the same again, not because of possession, not because of magic, but because the moment the mask touched their skin, something changed. Some say the mask erases the wearer, replacing them with something else. Others say it preserves them, trapping their true face beneath it forever. There are old tales of a mask that chooses its wearer, that once it is put on, it cannot be removed, that the person inside it is still there, screaming behind blank, unblinking eyes. And the most disturbing part, there are masks in museums, in collections, in forgotten boxes that have no known origin, masks that have never aged, never decayed, never lost their perfect, lifeless expression. Masks that are waiting for someone to wear them. And once they do, will they ever be able to take it off again? The city that burns forever. Some fires never die. There are ruins across the world, remnants of cities that were wiped out by war, disaster, or time. But there are stories of a city that did not simply fall into ruin. It burns, and it has been burning for longer than history remembers. Ancient travellers whispered of a distant place where the flames never went out. Some believed it was a punishment, a cursed land where the people had angered something powerful. Others said the fire wasn't destruction at all, but something else entirely. Some claimed the flames did not consume, that buildings remained standing, untouched, though the fire roared around them. Those figures could be seen walking through the inferno, unaffected, as if they belonged there. That voices echoed through the smoke, calling, laughing, weeping. What if the city was not abandoned? What if the fire is not killing, but preserving? Maybe those who once lived there never truly left. Maybe they are still inside the flames, trapped in an existence where time does not move. Maybe the fire is not a curse, but a barrier, keeping something contained, something that must never be allowed to walk among us again. And what happens if the fire finally goes out? The doors that lead elsewhere. Not every door was built for humans to walk through. Doors are meant to separate spaces, to divide one place from another. But some doors do not behave the way they should. There are stories, ancient and modern, of doors that appear where they shouldn't. Doors in the middle of forests, standing alone with no structure around them. Doors in old buildings that no one remembers installing. Doors that, when opened, do not lead where they should. Some believe that these doors are not mistakes, not abandoned relics of forgotten architecture, but gateways, not to another room, but to somewhere else, somewhere that does not follow our rules. There are accounts of people who stepped through and never returned. Others who walked in and came back. Wrong. Speaking in strange voices, unable to remember their own names, or claiming they had been gone for years when only seconds had passed. The scariest thought? Some of these doors do not need to be found. Some of them find you. And once you see one, it is already too late to turn back. The glowing blood. Not all blood is red. Some blood remembers what it once was. Ancient texts speak of rulers, warriors, and mystics who bled light. Their wounds did not spill crimson, but something brighter, something alive. Some said it was a blessing, proof of divinity. Others feared it, whispering that those with glowing blood were not human at all. But what if it was neither a gift nor a curse? What if it was a sign, a leftover trace of something ancient, something forgotten? Maybe long ago, before history was recorded, there were beings that bled differently. Maybe the first humans were not entirely mortal. Maybe something else ran through their veins. And maybe, even now, some of us still carry that light within us, waiting for the moment it is revealed. What if that moment is coming soon? And what if those with glowing blood were never meant to survive in this world? The astral hunters. Some predators do not hunt in the physical world. There have always been stories of beings that exist outside our reality, watching, waiting, circling like wolves just beyond the firelight. But what if they do not just watch? What if they hunt? Some believe that when we sleep, when our minds drift into the unknown, we leave something unguarded, that our consciousness extends beyond the body, reaching into places we were never meant to touch. And that when we do, something notices. There are accounts of people who wake up feeling like they were chased in their dreams, who wake up breathless, covered in unseen wounds, with memories of running from something they never saw. Some never wake up at all. What if sleep is not just rest? What if it is a battlefield? And what if every night we are fighting for our lives without even knowing it? The missing sound. Not all silences are peaceful. Some are wrong. There are places where sound simply stops, places where footsteps do not echo, where voices feel muffled, where even the wind refuses to make a sound. Some claim these are just natural anomalies. Others say they are something else, places where reality itself has been altered. But the real mystery is not just the silence, it's the missing sound. Some scientists have speculated that there may be frequencies we were never meant to hear. Sounds that were removed from existence itself. What if, long ago, something was taken from the world? A note, a vibration, a tone that once existed but was erased, on purpose. And what happens if we find it again? What if that missing sound was never just a sound? What if it was a voice? What if it was something that was meant to stay silent? And what if it starts speaking again? The forgotten children. Not all disappearances are accidents. Some were meant to be forgotten. There are stories whispered in old villages and lost in the margins of history of children who simply vanish. Not kidnapped, not lost, just gone. No records, no graves, no grieving parents. As if they were never there at all. But the strangest part, sometimes people still remember them. A neighbour recalls a boy who used to play in the fields, but no one else does. A woman dreams of a child she swears was once her sister, though her parents deny it. Photographs with an empty space where someone should be. Family homes with an extra, unused room, filled with toys that no one claims. What if these children were not just lost, but erased? What if something took them, not just from the world, but from memory itself? And the terrifying question, if they were erased, why? Were they dangerous? Were they special? Or did they simply see something they were never supposed to see? And if one of them ever comes back, will we even know? The smiling bones. Skeletons should not have expressions, but some seem to grin. There are archaeologists who whisper about unearthed remains that feel wrong, skulls that, despite centuries underground, seem to smile too widely, too deliberately. Bones that appear posed, as if they died in amusement rather than fear. Some believe it is just coincidence, a trick of time and decay. But others fear it is something else, a sign of those who did not just die, but surrendered to something ancient, a force that did not kill them in violence, but in a way far worse, with understanding. What if these were people who saw the truth, who realised in their final moments what the world really is? And what if, instead of screaming, they laughed, and the real nightmare? What if whatever they saw is still out there, waiting for someone else to understand? The tower without end. Some structures do not follow the laws of reality. There are myths of a tower that stretches beyond sight, beyond logic, beyond comprehension. No one knows who built it. No one knows how long it has existed. Some say it was discovered long ago, abandoned and still growing. Those who climb it never return. Some say it is infinite, that no matter how far one ascends, the top is always just out of reach. Others claim that at some unknown height, something changes. The walls shift, the staircases spiral in ways that break the mind. The windows start to show things that should not exist. And some believe that those who go high enough do not vanish. They simply become part of the tower itself. What if the tower is not just a structure? What if it is a being? And what if it is still unfinished, waiting for the next traveller to take their place among its endless halls? The book that writes itself. Some books are not meant to be read. Some books are not even meant to exist. There are old stories of a book that is never written in the traditional sense. A book that writes itself, adding new pages, new stories, new secrets, even when no one is watching. Some believe it is a record of all things past, present, and future. Others fear it is something worse, a book that creates what it writes, shaping reality with each new entry. And the most terrifying idea? It does not write randomly. It writes about whoever finds it. People who have come across the book claim that the moment they open it, they see words forming, describing their actions, their thoughts, their fate. Some throw it away, but it always finds its way back. Some burn it, only to wake up and find it waiting on their desk, pristine, untouched, updated, and those who keep reading. They eventually turn the page and find a final passage. And then they read the last line of their own story. No one knows what happens after that, because no one has ever been able to tell anyone. The mind that bled. Thoughts are supposed to stay in the mind, but some leak out. There are ancient beliefs that the mind is more than just thought. that it is a force, it's a living thing, something that can be wounded, that ideas can spill from a person the way blood spills from the body, and that when this happens, something else can get inside. Some people have reported a sensation like a tear in their consciousness, memories they do not recognize, thoughts that do not belong to them, ideas that feel like they were planted rather than created. Others describe the terrifying experience of feeling something leaving them, as if a part of themselves escaped, never to return. What if creativity is not always inspiration? What if thoughts are not always born, but transmitted? What if the reason some people hear voices or see visions or wake up with knowledge they never learned is because their minds have been breached? And if minds can bleed, what happens when they run dry? The vanishing faces. A face is supposed to be permanent, but some faces simply disappear. There are stories, strange, scattered, unsettling, of people who wake up and find that their own reflection has changed. Not aged, not wounded, but fading. As if the features that once made them are being slowly erased. Some report feeling different, detached, as if the world is starting to forget them. And then so do the people around them. First, their friends pause before recognizing them. Then strangers look right through them. Soon, even their own family hesitates before speaking their name. And eventually, no one remembers them at all. It's as if they never existed. What if identity isn't just a thing we hold inside, but something that needs to be maintained? What if we exist because we are observed, because others believe in us? And what happens when that belief fades? What happens when a face completely disappears? When there is no record, no memory, no proof that the person ever lived? Do they vanish too? Or do they simply become something else? Something that waits in the spaces between, searching for a way back. The blood that moves. Blood is supposed to flow through veins controlled by the body. But what if sometimes blood has a will of its own? There are old tales, buried deep in forgotten texts, of blood that does not stay where it should, blood that moves on its own. Some ancient warriors claim that after great battles their wounds would crawl, not from infection, not from injury, but because their own blood was trying to escape. Others whispered of kings and priests who had blood that refused to be spilled, wounds that sealed themselves shut before a blade could do its work. And then there were the cursed ones, those whose blood left them in the night, slithering out of their bodies like living things, searching for something, whispering as it went. What if blood is more than just fluid? What if it remembers? What if it wants something? And what if one day it stops listening to us? The eclipsed earth. What if the world was once in total darkness? What if it is meant to be that way again? The ancients feared eclipses, seeing them as omens, warnings, or moments when the gods turned away. But some myths speak of something darker, a time when the earth was never meant to have a sun at all. There are stories of civilizations that spoke of a different sky, a different world, one where light was an intrusion, where the stars were not meant to shine. Some ancient carvings show symbols of a second sun, one that was removed, erased, cast away to prevent something from waking. What if the sun is unnatural? What if it is temporary? What happens when the eclipse does not end? What happens when the earth returns to the darkness it was meant to know? The meat that breathes. Flesh is supposed to be dead once it is cut, but some meat does not stop living. There are disturbing stories, too many to be coincidence, of butchers and hunters who have encountered meat that moves on its own. Not nerves twitching, not decaying flesh spasming, but something worse. Meat that still breathes. Some pieces do not rot. They do not dry out, do not decay, do not die the way they should. They stay fresh, too fresh, warm to the touch, as if they are still alive. Some claim that certain cuts of meat bleed days after being taken from the animal. Others swear they have seen muscle shift, as if trying to reassemble itself. And the worst accounts? The ones that say the meat whispers. That if you listen closely, in the dead of night, You can hear something moving beneath the surface, something trying to form itself again. What if flesh does not need a body to live? What if, given enough time, it grows back into something? And what if it is no longer what it used to be? The silent births. Not all children are born crying. In some places there are stories of babies born in complete silence. Not because they are sick, not because they are weak, but because they refuse to make a sound. Some believe these silent children are omens, that they are born with knowledge they cannot speak, that they remember something before birth, something they must not share. In ancient times, midwives feared these births. Some claimed these children never laughed, never screamed, never reacted the way normal infants should. And in some cases, they were taken away, not for protection, but because their silence was wrong. And then there are the stories of the ones who grew up. Those who, even as adults, seemed off, who never spoke unless necessary, who never cried in pain, who never screamed in fear. Because some say they know something the rest of us do not, something so terrible that they cannot let it slip, because the moment one of them finally breaks their silence, the world will never be the same again. The hollow moon. The moon has always been there, but what if it was put there? For centuries, strange theories have surrounded the moon. It is too perfect, too stable. It does not rotate the way it should. It rings like a bell when struck. Some ancient civilizations spoke of a time before the moon, their myths describing a sky where it did not yet exist. What if the moon is not a natural satellite but a structure, a shell, a hollow construct left behind by something unknown? Some say it is an abandoned station, a relic of an ancient civilization that once watched over Earth. Others believe it is not abandoned at all, that something inside still waits. There are reports of strange sounds, deep vibrations that seem to come from within, moonquakes that should not happen, shadows moving where no one is. And if the moon was placed here, who put it there, and what happens when they return to check on it? The voice beneath the water. There are sounds in the deep that do not belong to anything human. The ocean is vast, dark, and filled with mysteries we have barely begun to understand. But sometimes it speaks. Deep-sea microphones have recorded sounds that defy explanation. Low, mournful moans, clicking patterns too complex for any known species, signals that seem to respond to their own echoes. Some of these noises are louder than anything we can comprehend, too vast to belong to any whale, too structured to be natural. There are sailors who claim to have heard a voice calling from the depths, speaking in no known language, but felt in the bones. Divers who have surfaced in a panic, swearing that something down there spoke to them. What if the ocean is not silent? What if something is waiting beneath the waves, something old? And what if all this time it has been whispering, waiting for us to finally understand what it is saying? The Library of the Dead. Some knowledge is never meant to be read. There are stories, ancient and modern, of a place where every lost word is kept, a library that does not exist on any map, yet holds books that were erased from history, texts that should have been destroyed. Some say it is hidden deep underground, where the dead whisper to those who dare enter. Others claim it is not a physical place at all, but a concept, a space that exists in dreams, accessible only to those who know how to listen. The books there do not collect dust. They are read by unseen hands, by minds that have long since left their bodies. Some who have glimpsed the library claim they saw books with their own names on them, filled with stories they had not yet lived. Others say they heard pages turning, though no one was there. What if the dead are not silent? What if they are still reading? And worse, what if they are writing new pages? The stolen sky. What if the sky we see is not the real one? There are old legends, barely remembered, barely recorded, of a time when the sky was different, not just in colour or stars, but in something deeper. Some ancient carvings show a second sun. Others speak of constellations that do not exist anymore, Some claim that the sky itself was taken, replaced with an illusion, a barrier between us and what lies beyond. What if the sky is not just an atmosphere? What if it is a prison? What if the universe beyond is something we were never meant to see? Something too vast, too terrifying, too incomprehensible? What if, long ago, the real sky was taken from us, hidden away so we would never remember what we had lost? And what happens if one day that illusion breaks? What happens when we finally see what has been watching us all this time? The eternal sentence. Some punishments do not end with death. There are ancient myths of souls who are sentenced not to hell, not to oblivion, but to something worse, a state where they can never leave, never move forward, never end. A sentence that never finishes. Some spirits are stuck, unable to die completely, unable to be reborn. They linger, trapped in the same moment, repeating their last thoughts, their last breaths, over and over again. But some stories say these souls are not trapped by accident. They were placed there, by something, someone, some force that decided they must remain. The scariest part, what if some people alive today are already serving that sentence? What if the feeling of déjà vu, of reliving the same struggles, the same pains, is not just coincidence, but a cycle, a punishment we cannot remember? And what if the only way to escape is to remember what we did to deserve it? The veil between days. Time is supposed to flow seamlessly, one day into the next. But what if there is a space between days? A hidden gap in time where something else exists? There are stories of people who wake up feeling as though they have lived an extra moment, a stretch of time that doesn't appear on any clock. Some claim that at the edges of sleep, in those seconds before waking, they have seen things, shapes moving in the corners of their vision, landscapes that do not belong to any known place. What if, between midnight and the dawn, there is a moment that does not belong to this world? A moment where time pauses, where something else takes its place, something that cannot be recorded, cannot be remembered, except in fleeting glimpses. And the most unsettling thought, what if one day someone steps into that space and never comes back? The forgotten rivers. Not all rivers appear on maps. Some have been erased, not by nature but by something else. There are old records of waterways that no longer exist, streams that were once known, rivers that once ran through valleys but have now vanished without a trace. Some say they dried up, others say they were taken. But some travellers claim they have seen them. Rivers that appear only at certain times, under certain skies, flowing through land that should be dry. The water is dark, too dark to see the bottom, and the current does not follow natural rules. Some who have touched it swear they heard voices beneath the surface. What if these rivers never truly left? What if they still exist, but in a place just beyond our sight? And what if one day they decide to return? The echoing tombs. Some graves do not stay silent, some tombs still speak. Throughout history there have been burial sites where people report hearing sounds, whispers, murmurs, even full conversations. These voices do not belong to the living, but they do not sound quite like ghosts either. They are not cries for help. They are not warnings. They are discussions. Some believe these tombs hold the remains of people who are never truly dead. Others think they are places where death itself is thin, where those buried still think, still debate, still plan. And then there are those who believe the voices are not coming from the tombs, but to them, messages, instructions, or even commands from something deeper, something unseen. What if the dead are not resting? What if they are waiting? The night that never ends. What if the sun sets one evening and never rises again? There are ancient stories of worlds that fell into darkness, not because of war or disaster, but because something took the light away. What if there is a moment in time, an event, a shift, a mistake, where night simply does not end? At first, people would assume it was a long eclipse, a temporary phenomenon, but as the hours stretch into days, into weeks, the truth would settle in. The sky remains black, the stars become unfamiliar, and the world starts to feel wrong. And then the real horror begins, because some things need the dark to move freely. Some things have been waiting for this moment, waiting for the endless night to begin. And what if the reason the sun is gone is because something swallowed it whole? The skin of the world. What if the ground beneath us is not just rock and soil, but something alive? The ancients believed the earth itself was a living thing, a breathing entity that carried all life on its back. But what if this idea was more than just metaphor? What if the world has skin, a thin, fragile layer that separates us from something vast and sleeping beneath? There are places where the ground moves in ways it shouldn't, where land shifts and trembles as though something underneath is stretching. Some say there are mountains that grow without explanation, valleys that seem to breathe in the early hours of the morning. What if earthquakes are not just random? What if they are the shudders of something deep beneath us? What if volcanoes are not natural eruptions, but wounds? And what if one day the skin of the world finally breaks open, and something from underneath begins to rise? The hungry horizon. The horizon is supposed to be a boundary, a distant line, unreachable, always ahead of us. But what if it is not just an illusion of distance? What if the horizon is moving? There are stories, rare and unsettling, of travellers who swear that no matter how far they walk, the land behind them is gone. That when they look back, there is nothing. No road, no city, no past. Just emptiness stretching out where the world should have been. Some believe this is just a trick of the mind, but others fear that something is eating reality, devouring it in slow, steady movements. A creeping void that erases everything the moment it is no longer observed. And the worst thought? What if the horizon has always been moving? What if we only exist as long as we keep looking forward? The clock that counts backward. Time is supposed to move forward, but some clocks do not follow that rule. There are tales, hidden in forgotten books and whispered in certain circles, of a clock that does not track time, but reverses it. Not in obvious ways, not in great leaps, but slowly. A minute here, an hour there. Those who come near it do not notice at first, but over time, things begin to change. They forget details they were sure they knew. They feel younger, their scars fading, their memories unravelling. Some wake up one morning to find an old injury is gone, their body reverting to an earlier state. Others, terrified, leave before they can find out how far the effect reaches. But what if someone stays? What happens if they let the clock keep ticking backward? Do they reach a point before their own birth? Or do they keep going further, into something else? The city that dreams. Not all cities are built, some grow. There are places in the world where buildings do not follow normal patterns, where streets appear overnight, where entire neighbourhoods shift as though the city itself is alive. Some say these cities are dreaming, that they are not inanimate, but sentient, constructing themselves according to some unknown will, that the roads do not lead where they should, because the city is still thinking, still deciding where it wants them to go. And the most unsettling thing, some people report dreaming of places they have never been, only to find those places waiting for them, fully formed, in a city they have never visited before. What if the city is not just dreaming? What if it is remembering? And what happens when it finally wakes up? The song without a singer. Some melodies do not belong to anyone. There have always been stories of music that plays when no one is performing. A tune on the wind, a hum in an empty room, a song with no source. Some believe these are echoes, remnants of something long forgotten, a performance that has never ended. But others fear the truth is stranger. What if the song itself is alive? What if it is looking for a singer? There are myths of people who hear a melody and feel compelled to hum it, unable to stop. Some say that once you sing the song, it owns you, that it was always meant to be sung, and once it finds a voice, it does not let go, and those who resist Some say the song follows them, that it gets louder the longer they ignore it, that it will not stop until it has been sung to completion, and no one knows what happens after that. The eyes in the soil. The ground beneath us is not as lifeless as we think. There are places where the earth watches. Farmers speak of fields where they feel an unseen presence, where crops seem to grow in unnatural patterns, as if observing those who walk among them. Some claim that if you dig deep enough, you will find something staring back. Not bones, not fossils, but eyes embedded in the dirt, unblinking, waiting. What if the earth itself is aware? What if every step we take, every road we build, every grave we dig is being watched? And what if the reason the soil buries things so easily is because it wants to keep them? The house that moves at night. A house is supposed to stay in one place, but some houses don't. There are stories, whispered between neighbours, passed down as local folklore, of houses that are never quite where they should be. A house at the end of the street one night, but 3 doors down the next. A farmhouse in the countryside that appears on different hills, shifting ever so slightly while no one is watching. A cabin in the woods that hikers swear was not there yesterday. No one sees them move, no footsteps, no dragging sounds, but somehow in the dead of night, they shift. Some believe these houses are lost, searching for a place they once belonged. Others say they are hunting, looking for someone specific, waiting for the right person to step inside. And the most terrifying thought, what if the house you wake up in tomorrow is not the one you went to sleep in? The road that was never built. Some roads exist before anyone paves them. There are places where paths appear overnight, perfectly worn, as if thousands have walked them, though no one remembers building them. Trails in forests that lead to places that should not exist. Highways that appear on maps for a short time, only for all records of them to disappear. But the most unsettling roads are the ones that only appear when you need them most. Drivers lost in the night have reported turning down a road that should not exist. Smooth pavement, no signs, no markings, only to find themselves somewhere impossible. Some never return. Others do, but with gaps in their memory, unable to recall what they saw, only that they should never go back. What if these roads are not man-made? What if they are older than cities, older than history, waiting for travellers to stray too far from where they were meant to go? And what happens when the road decides you've gone too far to turn back? The names that speak themselves. Some names demand to be spoken. Throughout history there have been names that bring unease, names that, once heard, stay in the mind. Some people feel compelled to say them aloud, unable to resist the urge, as if the name itself is pushing to be spoken. What if some names are not just identifiers, but summons? Some believe that forgotten names, names erased from history, scratched from stone, burned from books, did not vanish naturally. They were removed, silenced, because to speak them is to invite something back. And the truly unsettling thought, what if a name, once erased, knows? What if it wants to be remembered? And what if, one day, you wake up with a name in your mind, a name you have never heard before, but feel the desperate need to say? And the moment you do, something answers. The mountain that watches. Some mountains are not just land. Some mountains observe. There are places in the world where people feel watched, not by animals, not by spirits, but by the land itself. Mountains where no birds fly, no trees grow, where climbers report a constant awareness pressing against them. Some peaks seem untouched, as if no human presence has ever disturbed them. Others have been climbed countless times, but those who reach the summit speak of a feeling, a presence, an understanding, as if something buried deep beneath the stone is watching. What if mountains are not just part of the earth? What if they are beings, ancient, slow-moving, thinking in ways beyond our comprehension? What if they know who stands upon them? What if they choose who reaches the top and who never comes down? And what if one day one of them moves? The stars that went out. We assume that when a star dies, it simply burns out. But what if some stars did not die? What if they were taken? There are gaps in the night sky, places where stars should be, where they once were, but no longer shine. Some astronomers believe they simply faded over time, lost in the endless stretch of the cosmos. But some ancient texts speak of stars that did not dim, did not explode, but simply vanished, as if something reached out and plucked them away. What if the stars were never just burning spheres of gas? What if they were eyes or gates or sentinels, and something removed them because they no longer needed to watch? And the real question is, what happens when the last star goes out? And what will we see in the sky when the darkness is finally complete? The empty graves. A grave is meant to hold the dead, but what happens when the dead go missing? Throughout history there have been reports of ancient graves being unearthed, only to find them empty. No bones, no dust, no trace that anything was ever buried there at all. Some believe these bodies were stolen, moved, or destroyed, but others fear something stranger. What if some people never stay buried? Some cultures tell of graves that open on their own, coffins that are found unsealed, the earth above a burial site remaining untouched, while the inside is simply gone. Some believe these people were never truly dead, that they left in a way we cannot understand. And the most terrifying thought? What if these missing bodies aren't gone? What if they are walking among us without us ever realizing who or what they have become? The language older than time. Words shape reality. But what if there were words that shaped existence before time itself began? There are myths of languages spoken by things older than creation, words that were never meant for human tongues, sounds that, once spoken, could unravel everything we understand. Some texts suggest that language was given to humanity, not developed naturally, that the words we use now are fragments of something far greater, something that has been deliberately hidden. But what if some of these ancient words still exist? What if certain phrases, certain sounds were erased from history, not because they were dangerous to know, but because they were dangerous to speak? And what if someone, somewhere, unknowingly says one of these words aloud? Would it open something, close something, or would it simply remind something out there that we still exist? The mirror that remembers. Mirrors are supposed to reflect the present, but what if some mirrors remember everything? There are stories of old mirrors that show things they should not reflections of the world as it is, but glimpses of things long past, faces that should be dead, events that should be forgotten, movements that do not match the ones standing before them. Some believe that mirrors store reflections, that every face that has ever looked into them is still there, trapped just beneath the surface, watching. And sometimes, when no one is looking, those reflections move on their own. What if a mirror never truly forgets? What if, one day, you stare into an old mirror and see someone who should not be there? And worse, what if they recognize you? The bone forest. Most forests are made of trees, but some forests grow from something else. There are legends, buried in folklore, whispered in nightmares, of forests where the trees are not made of wood, where the trunks are pale, smooth, unbreakable, where the wind whistles through hollow branches that sound disturbingly like rib cages. Some believe these forests are not natural at all, but grown from something ancient, something that lived long ago and never fully died. There are stories of travellers who have heard deep groaning in these forests, as if the bones are remembering something, as if they are stirring. And the scariest part? What if the bone forest is not just a place? What if it is a graveyard, but one that is still growing? The door that opens on its own. Doors are meant to be opened by someone, but some doors do not wait. There are accounts of doors that open without cause. No wind, no force, no human hand. Some dismiss it as faulty hinges, air pressure, coincidence. But there are stories, hidden in old letters, passed down as warnings, of doors that open only when no one is watching, doors that lead to places that should not exist, Some claim these doors do not just open for people, but to invite them in. That there is something on the other side, waiting, watching, calling. Some people who walk through them never return. Others do, but they come back changed, their memories foggy, their thoughts not quite their own. And the worst part, some of these doors do not need a house. They can appear anywhere. And if you ever find yourself alone in a quiet room and hear the slow creak of a door opening behind you, whatever you do, do not turn around.